to do that now. My apologies. So we missed recording all that part, but okay. Okay, so the convention is an important process for our party. It's the fullest form of democracy and democratic discussion. So these debates are meaningful. Can I ask other people to mute themselves, please? Okay. Can I ask everyone else to mute themselves, please? I'm hearing some other noise in the background.
This might be Comrade Sarah. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so now I want to talk to you a little bit about just the logistics of what happens between now and the party convention. We have the discussion and the debate about the draft document. That's the main document that we'll be discussing. But between now and the convention, all the various party members are entitled to submit their remarks to the pre-convention discussion bulletin. And those will be published, as many of them as is necessary to transmit all the submissions that are received, so that everyone in the party can talk to everyone else in the party during this time about what they think are the most important political issues. Now, just out of, from logistical necessity, the submissions for the convention bulletin are restricted to 800 words. So people do have to think about it and be concise. And it's also, an appeal has been made that when we're sending in submissions and discussions about the documents, then we're not debating, like we're not going to get into worrying about grammatical niceties or correcting the grammar or the punctuation or very specific wording. This is not intended as a copy editing exercise, but as a real political exercise. But what we really want to grasp and get into is the contents of the politics. So in each region of the country, there will be other regional or provincial conventions for the purpose of passing resolutions and electing delegates to the Central Convention. Ours in Alberta is going to be held on June 5th. And at that point, we hopefully will have had several more sessions of this pre-convention discussion. Everyone will have had an opportunity to read and discuss and to submit written resolutions. So the resolutions that go forward to the party convention, the priority is given to those that come from provincial or regional nominating meetings or from party clubs. So individuals who want to submit resolutions are expected to do it through their club or through one of those nominating conventions. That way we know that, the resolutions coming in are going to be in a certain sense filtered, that they have at least some degree of general support. It's not, not just one person. It's not that the fastest typer gets to send in the most resolutions. So, another aspect is that all of the expenses of the delegates are borne by the central party and by the regional or provincial parties. That is, their travel expenses, their registrations are all paid collectively. So those who are elected as delegates are not being selected by their own individual ability to pay, but are being selected on a political basis by their comrades who they think would best represent them. Okay. So what I wanted to talk about now actually is to actually get into some of the content of what's in the document, the political draft document. As I said, we can't foresee every detail of what will happen in the political life of the country over the next 3 years. So this is broad and general, but we can foresee certain broad general political trends and discuss as to the fullest our plans about how we're going to meet those challenges. So the document begins by indicating the seriousness of the challenges that are facing us, the seriousness of the of the political situation, both in Canada and throughout the world. But there are a number of interweaving crises that are making life difficult for working people, and that, that pose real political dangers. The climate, the problem of climate change, the increasing problems of urgency of dealing with climate change, the pandemic, an economic crisis, the rise of right-wing movements and increasingly belligerent and sometimes violent right-wing movements, up to and including some fascistic and neo-Nazi groups in some parts of the world, and the rise of militarism, the increasing threat, the increasing reality as well as the threat of war. And these are all interrelated crises. The document talks about each one of them and all of them, but what I want to talk about is, to take a little bit of a step back and try to talk in a little bit more abstract terms about how all of these problems are really interrelated. Like, we actually know that the climate crisis is a human created crisis. It arises out of the industrial processes that are part and parcel of the capitalist system. Essentially, we're just burning too much stuff. But the pandemic is not unrelated to this crisis of the climate. Scientists, various kinds of scientists in the different fields of biological research have been warning for a long time that pandemics are coming, new diseases are coming, because of the more intensified interaction of humanity with the remaining reserves of wilderness, and the changes in climate providing more of a more living space for novel organisms. It is not a surprise that a pandemic has occurred. They couldn't predict exactly which virus it would be, but that there would be pandemics is not a surprise. But we even know that the American government had said, under the previous regime, had set up an office to deal with pandemic planning, and then Donald Trump had that office closed down at the beginning of his term, just in time for the coronavirus pandemic. But besides the natural environment and the problems of our interaction with nature, there's the overall economic crisis of capitalism. It's nothing new. There are cyclical crises of capitalism which are increasing in severity and intensity over time because of the structural crises of capitalism. Capitalism just doesn't really work all that well, and it's reached the limit of growth where it can grow its way out of some of these economic crises. Of course, the pandemic did not create the crisis, but it exacerbated the crisis. It made it that much worse. And it's very clear that capitalism does not have the tools to deal with these crises. It does not appear to be moving on the crisis of the climate, and then with the swiftness or the decisiveness that's needed to retool the economy away from fossil fuels. It does not have the tools to deal with the public health crisis of the pandemic, and it does not have the economic tools to deal with the economic impact of the pandemic. In the course of this pandemic, economic inequality has increased because government bailouts have taken the form of a great deal more money being siphoned off towards corporations rather than towards sustaining the buying power of ordinary working people. And this can only increase the seriousness of the economic crisis and make it harder on people, on working people, on everybody. And related to that, I think, is the rise of these far-right groups and even neo-fascist, neo-Nazi groups, because these far-right groups are a sign of people's lack of faith in the system, their fear and feeling of insecurity, their lack of confidence in the future of capitalism or their own future. Now, of course, the far right groups have come up with a storyline about the nature of the world, which is just completely obscurantist, completely devoid of realism, and which is very, very dangerous, because they turn this feeling of insecurity and this loss of confidence in the institutions of bourgeois society, not against the bourgeoisie or against the capitalist system which has created the problem, but using it to divide and sow hatred and mistrust amongst working class people around the world, both internally within each country and internationally. And so it's not unrelated to the rise of militarism and war propaganda as well. The first part of the document that we have deals with the crisis of the war in the Ukraine and something of the historical background of that. And of course, this is something which is of great importance to us. Like our party, it just naturally, any communist party in the world has to respond to a war or the danger of war, with a greatly increased attention to the fight to build the peace movement, to counteract war and war propaganda. And this is not just because war is bad. This is not just out of a basic human impulse of the horror of how people suffer in a war and how bad war is for human beings, for the climate, but it's also the case that war, unfortunately, is good for capitalism and war is bad for socialism. And the existence of every time capitalism can successfully create a war, this is a real setback to the working class movement within the countries that are at war, but also internationally. Because the rise of militarism also includes the rise of war propaganda. We've seen that in Canada now, like just a tsunami of hysterical propaganda, essentially demonizing Russia and trying to turn the neo-fascist elements of the Ukraine into some kind of heroes of democracy. But it's not just that, it's not just the war is bad for the Ukraine or that the war is bad for Russia. The war is also bad for Canada. It's not just the loss of the resources that could be spent on social programs and on mitigating climate change, which are now being poured into military spending instead. Although those are very serious problems. Those are definitely non-trivial problems. But it's also this ideological assault of pitting one nationality against each other, of trying to depict the world a kind of comic book, cartoonish image of the world of good guys and bad guys, with where nationalities or countries are depicted as the good guys or the bad guys. Our party doesn't stand on the side of Russia. Our party doesn't stand on the side of Ukraine. Our party stands on the side of the Ukrainian working class and the Russian working class. And it's in the interests of neither of those countries, of neither of those working class contingents, for their countries to be at war. And it is not in the interests of the working class in Canada to be swept up in this kind of war propaganda and xenophobia and this this propaganda which justifies increased spending on militarism, increased belligerence in foreign policy around the world, not just in the Ukraine and Russia, but against all kinds of countries who may have their own domestic economic policies which are at variance with the economic interests of the multinational corporations that the capitalist governments serve. So for all these reasons, war is a very dangerous and a very difficult thing for socialists in any country. And it has got to be one of our primary goals to fight against war propaganda, to counteract war propaganda, and to build up the forces of the peace movement as much as possible. So it's very important for us to have an understanding as well of how we should approach this question, like which questions we should bring forward in our own counter propaganda. What is going to have the most impact in bringing unity amongst the forces that are in favor of peace and making them most effective in counteracting war propaganda? And we have had several party meetings, several cross-country meetings on Zoom, to discuss this question. One of them just last weekend. And it's, this point really needs to be emphasized, is that it's not our job to glorify Russia or demonize Russia. It's not our job to glorify Ukraine or demonize Ukraine. It's our job to point out the what's wrong with the NATO and the belligerence and aggressiveness of the imperial powers, which our own capitalist government is a part of, and the alliances that our own capitalist government is part of. Our job is to fight against our own militarists and to overcome our own the militarism within our own country. And so we can make common cause with people who may have differing views about the actual nature of Russia and the actual nature of the Ukraine, as long as we can agree upon a central point, is that the solution to the problem has to be a negotiated peaceful settlement. That the crisis will not be solved by more war, and that future crises like these will not be solved by pouring more and more money and resources into armaments and military alliances, but by promoting the development of peaceful, mutually respectful relations between countries and making use of diplomatic resources to resolve any potential future disputes or antagonisms or rivalries. So I don't want to go on at great length. I'm not going to go through the whole document. I hope people have had a chance to do some reading, and that that I would now like to throw it open for some general discussion about the more general sort of points that I've made, but also like specifically what's in the first sections of this document, which talk about the international situation and the crises and serious problems that we're facing. So I just like to then throw it open for discussion. So I see Jeremy already has his hand up. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Thanks for that overview, Naomi. Two kind of areas that really drew me in this first section were my thoughts around in line 53 when that's talking about the climate crisis. There is a resolution in there to talk about we need to build more electric cars, free public transit, build publicly owned interurban transit, retool car plants, build trains and other sustainable transportation. But I do think we do really target the industry a lot. But we don't look, the assessment that's provided in the climate crisis isn't looking at urban and rural transportation for public transit. So it would be interesting to see a resolution that would include that assessment, where we're looking at the infrastructure of public transportation across like just rural areas of Canada and areas of just in cities too, of how there's a lack of accessible and affordable transportation. And the other area that drew me in this first document was first half of it was in line 36. I think we need to have more of an analysis of migrant workers and temporary foreign worker programs in Canada. looking particularly in Alberta in the Cargill meatpacking plants where there was a substantially more larger amount of workers there who were migrant workers, and had a successful participation in union drive with UCW, I think, the union there. So yeah, those two areas I just noticed in the first half that maybe need more analysis and observation in. Thanks.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I was still muted. Okay, so I'm just inviting, is there anybody else? If you want to either put your hand up, use the raise hand function, or if you also, if you could just put your name in the chat and then we could call on you to speak. Okay, so I see Corinne has her hand up. Go ahead, Corinne.
One point of clarification was they use the word supranatural, and I don't know if that is interchangeable with transnational or
National?
yeah, supranational, or does it have a different meaning? That it's a little unclear to me, and I think I'll make a note of where that was.
Yeah. Do you see a specific?
It's on 84. No, sorry, wrong one. Wrong one.
I think you could probably, for rough and ready purposes, kind of assume that supranational and multinational or transnational corporation essentially would mean the same thing.
So yeah, no, it talks about supranational national trade on 154. So it says solidarity against transnational corporations and supranational trade and financial bodies such as the World Trade Organization and the World Bank.
Yeah.
Just I'm not really sure what the definition of that word would be.
Yeah, well, yeah, essentially I think they're just using it as a sort of more technical way of saying it's not just the corporations themselves, but the sort of the global infrastructure that they have created for, for globalization and international trade, like the World Bank and various trade, various international trade agreements and so on. The kind of the overarching set of institutions that they've created for international trade, which in some ways they're attempting to make those stand above national governments. So there are, there's a couple different kinds of things. I mean, there are legitimate international, multinational or global agreements, like there's rules about how you can use the resources of the open oceans and so on. And things like rules of, like if treaties that would say, like no weapons in space and things like that. There's, legitimate global agreements, but there's also these trade agreements which are much more tailored towards serving the interests of the multinational corporations. And those are not the only kind of trade agreement there could be. So we're being critical about a specific form of agreement, not, this is not saying anything about international agreements generally. So, okay. So I see there's a hand up for the Ukrainian Center, so I'm not sure who it is who wanted to speak there.
Yes, Chris would like to speak.
Yeah, I have a couple points. We can go one at a time so that they can go to other people. But the first point I have is I'm generally in agreement about the need to focus on what we can control specifically around NATO. But I've sort of prepared sort of a little comment about my thing. Sorry if it's a little lengthy, but while we've made sure to point out the illegality of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we should be cautious about placing the blame as a singular result of NATO's imperialism. I worry that this focus on NATO alone could be misconstrued as support for Russian aggression. An addition should be made to clarify that while the position of the Russian Federation is deeply influenced by NATO's imperialism, it is simultaneously being colored by the nascent imperialism of the Russian Federation, which has been built up by Putin's government in reaction to the worsening conditions of Russia resulting from the fall of the USSR, the complete restoration of capitalism in the former Soviet republics, and the submissive position that Putin's predecessors had taken towards America and NATO's centered imperialism after the fall of the USSR. While NATO's expansionist policies have certainly pushed the escalation of this conflict, we must not allow ourselves to confuse Putin's chauvinistic ambitions of a great Russia with a genuine anti-imperialist struggle. Russia, while weaker than it once was, is still a nuclear power that actively imposes its will upon its neighbors for the benefits of its own bourgeoisie. Our allies in this conflict are neither NATO, Ukraine, or the Russian Federation, but rather the working and oppressed peoples of the world, whose lives and livelihoods will be caught in the crossfire of the wars waged by the ruling classes of the world. That's sort of the point I wanted to make on the Russia issue.
You can continue, Chris, if you like, if you have more points.
That was just kind of summing it up. I agree with the whole of everything in there. I think it's excellent for us to be focusing on how NATO's kind of been pushing this along, but I worry that, especially given a lot of the narrative here right now about, like you see in the media all the time, Russia being still called communist and stuff, by not putting any blame beyond just a single line saying what Russia did is illegal, I worry that we open ourselves up to being included in criticisms of Putin where we're not supportive of Putin, we're not supportive of the current government in Russia, we're against the war, and I just think it would be good to have an addition in there that really pushes that in there as well.
That pushes.
That Russia is not a victim as much as it's its own imperialist power trying to become in its own way.
Well, there's people that,
Oh, Martin, you'd like to speak now?
well, just to follow up what he said, there's people who don't believe that Russia's done anything illegal because they've recognized Donetsk and the other area there as separate from Ukraine, and they've signed a security treaty with them, just the same way that China signed the security treaty with that, was it Tonga, and those islands there in the Pacific. So, you know, under that arrangement, it's not necessarily illegal that they've gone in there. So, like she was saying, it might be better not to say anything bad about Russia because everybody's got a different opinion.
May I speak, Naomi? Just on that? Okay, yes. I think Chris makes a fair point. I noticed on paragraph number 8, it says that imperialism has nevertheless cast the war in Ukraine as a struggle between Russian communism and Western democracy, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think that's quite right. I don't think it's been characterized as Russia being communist. I would prefer a change in wording there to Soviet revanchism or something like that. So that's something like what Chris is saying. But further to Chris's point, I think we should have somewhere in this section, we should characterize what we think Russia is, or make it clear that we think that it is a capitalist state, a bourgeois state, a nascent imperialist, or a sub-imperialist state. I think those are good ideas.
But isn't that just your opinion, though?
Well, there are economic determinations which tell us what is an imperialist state based on the level of monopoly capitalism. Is a country privatized? What level of privatization of the economy is there? So Russia is objectively a capitalist state. The question is whether it rises to the imperialist level, the monopoly capitalist level. That is definitely an open question, and people can argue on both sides.
But I mean, every country in the world, except maybe North Korea, is a capitalist country. China's capitalist.
Well, it depends on the level of public ownership of the economy. It depends on the character of the state. So we say that Vietnam is socialist. China is, we can argue on that. Vietnam is socialist. Laos is socialist. Cuba is socialist. DPRK is socialist.
Does it really matter?
Well, it does matter
How?
because we are fighting for socialism here in Canada.
Yeah, but you don't just jump over the one line and all of a sudden you're socialist. You move towards that. And it takes a long time to get there.
But the big
If I could-
steps, yeah, this is a lot that we were getting into, maybe a tangential discussion, which is very good,
Well,
but
yeah, if I can jump in here, I'm going to say, this conversation is probably taking place at every party meeting across the country. And, because the issue is, like, we really do have to grapple with these issues about what's going on there. What kind of war is it? What kind of countries are these? Like, we have to try to understand the world. But even more important, though, we have to remember, we have to keep track of the fact that our job is not to, is not to separate ourselves from every other, peace-loving force by pointing out how we see things differently. Our job is to unite the peace forces, is to find the common ground that we can agree upon. And I think it's, there's going to come a point where we're going to have to say that strategically, politically, our job is not to correctly characterize Russia, but to make the case that Canada should not be involved in war preparations. Canada should not be involved in war, and Canada should not be supporting, should not be sending armaments and war material to the Ukraine. Our job is to criticize the Canadian government, to find common grounds with other, peace forces within Canada to work on that, to build up that unified peace response. So, we will discuss what Russia is like, but that's not the primary job that we have as communists. And there's still going to be room, frankly, I think, within our party, by the end of this kind of discussion and debate, there's going to be differences of opinion. It's not the sort of thing where we're going to pass a resolution saying that everybody must take the position that Russia is this or Russia is that, or for that matter, that everybody must take the position that China is this or that. Just like, you're going to find people with differences of opinion about, some really important historical events, like what actually was the cause of the collapse of socialism in the Soviet Union. People who disagree about the role of Stalin and so on. Like, we don't always have to agree about all these things. We do have to agree about what's the strategically important issues that are going forward. So I'm not telling people not to discuss these things, but to remember to discuss them in the way that's going to be most fruitful for how we can really clearly understand what our strategic role should be within the peace movement. So, okay, I'm going to, got several other hands up there. I'm going to ask Ian next.
I just wanted to briefly reply to what Alex was saying is in the point 8. I think the point of that there where it says the struggle between Russian communism and Western democracy is it's obviously not the case, and it's saying like, while nothing could be further from the truth. The purpose of that one is to not allow people to use a situation like that to criticize what we're trying to do as the Communist Party. And I think that pops up a lot where when people are trying to criticize a government, they'll just say, oh, it's communist for whatever reason. And I think it's important the reason why that should be in there is to not allow people to use like a caricature to attack us and what we're trying to do. So maybe it could be worded better, but I think that the purpose of that point, I think, stands.
Thanks, Ian. Okay, Jason?
Well, just on the last point that we brought up, it's actually something of a concern that we're sort of reviving Tagliotti's polycentrism, the idea that Marxist-Leninists or Marxists can have a wide variety of different views on major international events. I don't think we should just, throw that out there and accept that, okay, everyone has a different opinion. That's not a Marxist position. We should have universally consistent positions with Marxist parties on an international scale on major events like this. And when we don't, something is wrong somewhere with someone's views, and we should be trying to identify what that is and who actually has the correct analysis of material reality. We shouldn't just say, okay, to each their own. I feel like that's not a Marxist way to approach some of these debates and splits.
Okay, yeah, okay, good point. I'm going to jump in to actually sort of talk about that, because it's true that, you know, if there are two different points of view about what something that's going on in the world, at least one of them must be wrong, right? Like, but it's also, you know, we're not looking for some kind of academic perfection. And for one thing, you're not going to get, you know, universal agreement, because if you even go and look at what has been said by different communist parties around the world, they're not unanimous. Right? That this, you know, the hope of unanimity, of complete agreement entirely in you know, the whole global communist movement is just simply an unrealistic expectation. What we're looking for is, what are really what are the most important points? Like, where do we really need to be agreed, where we really need to act as in a united way on the things that are the most important, that are the most strategically important for our political work. And there are areas of, you know, there are interesting and important topics where we have to just frankly admit we don't have the resources, we don't have enormous, you know, numbers of people involved in research bureaus to, you know, to carefully look into all sorts of questions. And some of it, you know, some of our work is going to have to be, we focus on what's really most important. The questions which we cannot yet decide for either you know, logistical reasons or resource reasons, or because they just they haven't become the issues that are the most significant for political work in Canada, you know, we'll set aside to another day. So, you know, well, we need to agree on the things that are the most important, but we also have to have a clear idea in our minds about which are those most important things and which are the things that we can afford to just not take the time to debate. Now, I'm not saying that this is not an important discussion. This is a very important discussion, but we need to keep focused on how to make this discussion fruitful in terms of letting us go out with the most clear-cut and united point of view on what slogans we should be putting forward in the more general peace movement in a way which is going to be most effective at uniting the peace forces in Canada. So, okay, I see Helen's hand is up next.
Thank you. Very good discussion, comrades. I think you all made good point. However, in my opinion, you know, this country right now is at a very critical time. The economic situation here is not good. The working condition, living condition of working Canadians are all deteriorating at a rapid speed. And is another concern that I have is it looks like the right wing forces and the white supremacists seem to be addressing these issues where we don't have any practical solutions. So that really concerns me. So my point is we should focus on the condition of working Canadians, especially those who struggle the most, and address their concerns and figure out a way to mobilize them. In one word, rather than, of course, it's important to make an assessment of the general international situation, the national situation, but more important to come on agreement on some workable solutions to the national issues that the majority Canadians are facing. That's just my 2 cents. Thank you, comrades.
I see Kareen's hand up. Is that still or again?
Sorry, it's again. I put my mute on. I just want to respond to what Alex said. I think that number 8 does identify what the real problem is. It's imperialism. But they're trying to say that, you know, imperialism is trying to disguise what it's doing by putting all these different labels on things. Any country which has any kind of centralized government that's trying to not privatize everything seems to be subject to attack, like Libya and Syria. They're all prime for war. And it's basically, but the label they'll put on it is they're not democratic, or they've got some other problem there that, regime change. They're just trying to disguise what it really is. And the real problem is imperialism. It's the jockeying for markets. And I don't know, I think the article, the sentence does sort of say that, they're just trying to label it with other things to disguise the fact that this is about imperialism.
Okay, so again, I see there's a hand up at Ukrainian Center. Is that again or still?
Yeah.
Well, this is Martin now, would like to.
Okay. All right, Martin, go ahead.
So, yeah, I agree with Helen there. What she said, just focus on the things that will get you votes, not the things that won't get you votes. I mean, what was it, November when the election was? I voted. I've never voted in my life. In my life, I've never voted. And I'm almost 67. And the reason is because I figured they're all the same. The one's as bad as the other. So it didn't matter who got in there. And that goes as well for America. And that's why, the Russians wouldn't interfere, because no matter who's in, it doesn't matter. They still hate the Russians, So you've got to just focus on something that gets you votes. Now, do I have the figures correct that you had less than 1% of the vote?
Mhm.
Is that right? So
That's
you've
about
got
right.
to you've got to really focus on the important things. And so I had a chance this morning just to look. I didn't go right to the end of that document you sent me, but there were a couple things that sort of glaring things that stood out. Now, first of all, for people who don't read the document, the word communism, when you think of it, immediately you think of Chairman Mao and Great Leap Forward and Stalin and things like that. So it's just a bad name. It could have been a better name, but you're not going to change the name, so you're stuck with that. But in Alberta, if you want to shut down the tar sands, there isn't anybody in Alberta that's going to vote for it. And if you want to close all the pipelines, it's so that you're not releasing any carbon into the atmosphere, nobody's going to vote for it. You've got to, I've lived in China for 20 years on and off, and I've seen what they do. I've taken university courses on studying them about, their climate, what they're doing about climate and stuff, but they do things in steps. And they don't just say, okay, next year we're going full electric, but Guangzhou or Shenzhen will all of a sudden, this year, it's going to be all electric taxis and buses, and the same with Beijing. And then they're building this huge solar farm in the Xinjiang desert. And then they're building hundreds or maybe thousands of these giant windmills on the sea. So bit by bit by bit, they're trying to reduce coal emissions and things like that. And that's what you have to do, is you have to go step by step. And one of the things that I saw you had written there was free transportation. Well, even in China, you still pay for buses, but it's very cheap. You get on a bus, it's maybe 25 cents. But I can remember 25 years ago in Toronto, it was $4 to go 2 kilometers. And then you'd have to spend another $4 to go the 2 kilometers back when you're done. Well, there's 2 people, that's $16. So something's wrong there, but you don't have to make these big jumps like I saw, written in there. But something that Germany does, your stuff about NATO and NORAD, and reducing, don't buy these fighters and reducing military expenditures 75%. Great idea from what I could see. But Germany is, I think it might be the only country in the world, I'm not sure, but post-secondary education is free. And it's even free for non-Germans if they get a visa to go to school there. But of course, they'd have to be able to speak German in order to understand what was being said. So some of that money that you're saving, on the military infrastructure, you can put it towards education. So if anybody loses their particular job, whatever they have, they can say, well, I'm going to go back to NATE and it's not going to cost me anything. Because if you look at the tuition costs plus the housing costs, most people can't afford that, to go back to school for 2 years or something. But yeah, that's my 2 cents anyway.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Helen, is that still or again?
Sorry, I forgot to lower my hand. Sorry.
Okay, so, all right. All right, anybody else? We've got lots of time and quite a few people here who haven't actually said anything yet. So, certainly I want to open it up that, people can throw in their 2 cents worth. You don't have to be a party member because, as I said, this is an important period of time for us to have, a really broad discussion, that our delegates go to the convention really understanding as much as they can about, what they expect the political process to be in Canada over the next few years. So Ian, is that you again?
Yeah. So this is a totally different point. So throughout the document, there's obviously a lot of claims, a lot of stats, but there's only a few sources used in it. And my issue isn't with that. It's so for the point number 1, there's the references to the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, which is of course a very famous group of scientists that have their metaphorical doomsday clock that they update. But I guess my issue is that it also is a publication of just regular writing articles and typical kind of media stuff. And they've been recently, within the last year or two, a big propagator of lab leak theories and kind of contributing to the anti-China kind of imperialist narrative things that is not strictly adherent to science. Lots of people have actually criticized their one of their popular articles that they published about the lab leak. So while I understand that they've done lots of really good and useful work in the past, and the metaphor is very helpful, I don't see why we should value that as a source that gets linked right in our very first point if some of their work is actually very counterproductive to what we want to do, especially if the only other time references and sources are used in the document are for things like Statistics Canada. So it's not a critical disagreement. I don't think that the doomsday clock is maybe it's just useful enough that it's worth keeping in there, but it's worth keeping in mind as well that the legitimacy of an institution like that can then also be used against us when they publish people like I believe it's Nicholas Wade and some other things. So they've also published in things that are good on China as well. It's just that is something I have read before and noticed right away when I looked at the document.
Okay, Salem.
Hi. So
Thanks.
so with regards to domestic policies that might add appeal to the party, I had a question about whether there was any position on a universal basic income or UBI within the party, because that's something where there's been a lot of experiments done, not only in Canada, but all across the world. And most of them come to the same conclusion that, even if you pay people, that doesn't necessarily mean that people will stop working. People will still regardless work, just to make the extra income. So I was just curious. I didn't see anything about it in the document, but maybe I missed it.
Okay. All right. We'll circle around back to that one later on, I think. So, okay, I see that there's a couple of things in the chat. I don't know, like Adam, are you able to actually speak, or were you only able to print this out?
That was just the entirety of my comment there.
Uh-huh.
I didn't really have much to add, so I didn't see a reason to wait.
Oh, yeah. So, okay, so Adam just said, I would like to disagree on the stance against free transit, which for someone like me would be a must. I agree fully with the point as written regarding transit. I cannot afford to move around my own city as it stands. Even a reduced transit cost would be too much. And then there's a question from Alex Roth. So I think that we'll actually take Alex's question as a sort of something that we'll circle around to again later on as well, because it's about China, and I think it's not, not strictly the most germane to what we're discussing here tonight, but we will come back to it. So I'm going to call on Drees now at this point.
Yeah, okay. So basically I'm further down the document a little bit here. Line 122. It reads, this new Cold War atmosphere underscores the importance of demands to deeply cut military spending, to stop the purchase of fighter jets and warships, to repatriate Canadian troops and weapons. These demands are labeled anti-war and unpatriotic, despite the reality that peace negotiation would save the lives of civilians and soldiers, stop the destruction of cities, farms, food, and productive capacity, and prevent mass movement of refugees. Funds diverted from war preparations to civilian spending would create jobs, raise living standards, stop climate change, strengthen social programs, and expand public services. Now, I don't disagree with any of that. It's not so much a disagreement, but maybe more about specificity, perhaps. Like we say, funds diverted from war preparations, the first part there, to civilian spending would create jobs, for example, right? The first part of that sentence in that particular section. Should perhaps it be a little more specified as in terms of a concrete example of how that might be done, or is that just too much verbiage for that particular section? Nope, cancel. I don't want to do that.
Can you remind the line the line that it's on again?
Yeah, 122. It's on page 23. It's very top of page 23.
Okay. Well, I think let's kind of collect some of these points together rather than trying to just, answer everything fully, and it's kind of going off in all directions a bit. So I see that, okay. Salem's hand is up. Is that again or still?
No, sorry, I didn't realize I had to unraise it.
Okay, so knowing that. Okay, so I've got the Ukrainian Center hand up again. Somebody else want to speak there?
Yes, Chris would like to speak.
It's
Yeah.
a new point, so if anybody
Okay.
wanted to comment on the point on 122, I would let them go first and come back to me, but I had a new point to start.
Right.
Can I just mention on 122, we can discuss it, thanks to Drees for bringing it up. But technically, I thought we were only supposed to discuss up to paragraph 118 in this meeting, and then the next half of the document at the next meeting. But the point has been risen, so we should discuss it. But back to Chris.
Okay, Chris, go ahead.
My point was on the UBI actually from point 113, because 113 covers a range of topics that are issues that we could be organizing around. And so my point is on the one that says enact a guaranteed annual livable income. I think this should be removed. Universal basic incomes are at present a very popular idea in liberal circles for how we can go about lifting people out of poverty. While this is an amicable goal, we communists must not allow ourselves to be caught up in bourgeois fantasies. A UBI would first of all be incredibly costly to the state and has traditionally been postulated not as an addition to universal social programs, but rather as an alternative to them. Enacting a UBI will place us further along the path of the bourgeois parties successfully making their case that making cuts to our social programs and expanding privatization are necessary to undo the harms of irresponsible government spending. They will likely argue that a UBI would put the power in the hands of households to choose their providers of healthcare and education, yet we would see prices rise and quality fall as capital conquers the carcass of our social safety net. It is also unlikely that any of the major bourgeois parties would ever support a truly universal basic income. Just as they are unwilling to provide dental care without means testing or other restrictions or limitations. So instead, we would likely see a conditional basic income, which would surely follow in the great tradition of Canadian social programs of leaving the most impoverished and marginalized people out in the cold while actually providing as little public service as they possibly can. In creating a UBI, we also make the working class dependent upon the bourgeois state. Their livelihoods would depend not upon their ability to supply or withhold labor to or from the capitalist class, but upon the well-being of the capitalist state and ultimately the capitalist class itself. It does not liberate the workers from their wage slavery, but rather attempts to make them into docile subjects. It is a policy of class collaboration that would require the furthering of the hyper-exploitation of the working class abroad in order to sustain the heightened conditions of the domestic working class, while also guaranteeing the bourgeois class receives still ever greater profits. Furthermore, it is most likely that landlords, grocers, internet and telephone service providers, etc., will adjust their prices and supply in order to soak up these funds and leave workers in much the same position as they were before the introduction of a guaranteed annual livable income. This policy is one that would benefit the bourgeoisie at every turn, and one way or another will weaken the working class and must therefore be opposed by Canada's Party of Socialism. In its stead, I would make the case for adding the following as potential gains and concession that we could organize around. First, eliminating any legal distinctions between part-time and full-time employees, requiring employers to provide all workers with any benefits or perks currently restricted to full-time employees. Second, making any time worked over 32 hours a week overtime. Third, increase of overtime rate from 1.5 to 2 times regular pay. 4, an increase of the minimum wage to $25 an hour. As at 32 hours a week, this would yield the same income as a $20 per hour minimum wage at a 40-hour work week. And 5, a guarantee of 4 weeks paid vacation and 2 weeks of paid sick. That was my comment.
May I address that, Naomi?
Sure, go ahead, Alex. Yeah.
I think many of those additional reforms are what the party calls for. The 25, I don't know what the minimum wage we call for right now. Is it, I think it is $25, $23 an hour. Okay. The point about guaranteed livable income, or UBI, I guess, is very fair. You know, it is a scheme promoted by capitalists and neoliberal capitalists. But I think the key point here is that it is included within all these other reforms. You know, if it is a demand by itself, it is subject to exactly all those criticisms you've leveled. But if it is included within all these other demands for public housing, for pension reform, increase in pensions, et cetera, then calls to increase public services and welfare state services. You know, then it is those criticisms don't apply, I think, in that case.
I think that, just to disagree, I think that it still remains. Like, I think when we look at, like, I think school vouchers in Alberta are a great example with the public but not public school, whatever they're called, charter schools. You see the conservative argument is always, oh, you get to choose what you want, and yet it's still suffering from all the same issues of just direct privatization. It's higher cost, it's lower quality, and it's less accessible to people. And I think that because it's not us making these laws, it is not likely to ever be us in the next 5-10 years making these laws. These are concessions we're trying to force out of a liberal conservative coalition NDP liberal government. You're always going to be getting from them little like snippets, little corners cut, little tricks put in there to make sure it doesn't go to everyone, to make sure there are rules in place. And I think it is harder for them to do that to something like a direct shortening of the working week, to a direct improvement of conditions in the workplace. Whereas this is creating a program that is going to be used to attack other programs down the road. Conservatives will look at this as a reason to cut other social programs, saying people get, X money in their bank account every month. They can go pay for their own health insurance. They can go pay for bus tickets. They can go pay for this and that, all the while, expecting the government to keep up all the time with, price controls, for example. If you're trying to keep, any business from raising its prices to just absorb this, most likely landlords is the typical kind of thing people bring up. You're going to have just a lot more red tape, which is just more fuel to kind of the conservative arguments against. I just think it's ultimately kind of going to put the working class in a weaker position, no matter how we spin it. It always plays to the advantage of bourgeoisie and very rarely yields something actually better in the long term for the working class.
Okay,
Okay. Next, I've got Corinne and then Helen again. Corinne?
Well, I feel that it's still necessary to fight for housing, because no matter what we do in regard to a basic income, that's still going to be an issue. You won't be able to use whatever basic income you've got if housing costs are sky high. We still have to keep working conditions under, improved. But there is a huge cost in gatekeepers forking out little bits of money to people. Who qualifies for pension, who qualifies for disability, who qualifies for welfare. That's a lot of money we're spending. And there's savings there if we just gave people a basic income. And also all the money we put into policing, those people that can't get into, get anything out there. That's a lot of expense that we're spending. So I think there's savings there in the gatekeeper department.
Okay. Helen? Helen, if you wanted to speak again, you're still muted.
Yes, okay. So I have difficulty to unmute myself. Okay, thank you. I don't know if the party has done anything regarding the welfare system, but as a social worker by profession who works within the welfare system, I personally believe the welfare system in Canada will collapse. And it's actually, this is just my personal opinion from my personal observation as a person who works within the system, is collapsing. So is the party aware of this? Has the party done some research and on this subject? And I think it's critically important to understand how the impact the wealth have on working Canadians, particularly the poor who already struggle due to these issues we are all aware. And some of the strategies we can apply to address those issues, and at least use these issues to make a point for socialism and to build a mass movement, mobilize the Canadian workers to join us. Do we have something like that? Is there any mentioning at all in our convention documents? I think it's critically important to address this important issue.
Okay, Jeremy?
Thank you. Yeah, I echo that point with Helen. Actually, I in my working life, Helen and I talk on a number of different client issues as well as we're working together within the welfare system. But one thing I want to emphasize with the collapse of the social welfare system that I think we're witnessing the early stages of has been the increased you know, like these like Alberta Works and Asian Alberta have been really following policies to the T on what people are eligible for, how people can get into AISH or Alberta Works. What we're also seeing is like a growing number of people falling into these social net programs. A lot of people who are disabled already coming into this pandemic, when CERB was available, a lot of folks access CERB as well as their social welfare without having any kind of financial education on that, any kind of talks about the consequences of how that could affect them being audited in tax seasons. And so what are we seeing? We see people who are already maybe homeless or marginalized in the community accessing this without the knowledge of how it would impact them down the road, and getting struck with a $25,000 $30,000 bill by the federal government to pay this money back. And you know, as a consequences of them taking that money, their entire social welfare is taken away from them. So they're the first to be audited when we're looking at austerity budgets coming into place. How does that impact on the ultra wealthy, you know, or the capitalist class in Canada? Well, they're not audited at all. They're given the free reins to you know, price fix and you know run down organizing at job sites and everything like that. So I do think more needs to be done. There is a little bit talked in 107. Oh, sorry, 106, talking about the issues of the CWS in comparison to CERB. I think we need to consider like looking at the early stages, I think, of you know, because welfare systems are provincially legislated, but I think across the board in Canada, we're seeing a greater strain and a tightening of the rope for especially the disabled in this country to access just basic income to survive. So thanks.
Okay. So again, I see the hand up at the Ukrainian Center. Is that is that again or still?
Yeah, I'll just make
Yes, Martin would like to speak
Yeah.
again.
Okay, go ahead, Martin.
a quick comment on the what did you call the where everybody gets a minimum universal basic income. So if you're in a country like Sweden or somewhere, a very small country, very high tax as well, you know, they might be able to do something like that. One of the physical aspects of Canada is it is enormous country. You know, it's almost as big as Russia, or I don't even, it might even be bigger than Russia, but it was smaller than the Soviet Union. But you've got a service, you've got a huge debt you've got to pay every month, servicing all these communities everywhere in Canada, which you don't have in little countries like Sweden or these other Nordic countries that like that sort of stuff. And the first thing you got to do is get elected before you start off on these, you know, climbing Mount Everest and this and that. And, you know, if you're offering people, you know, a huge minimum wage and a huge paid vacation, you're not going to get the votes. If you just go with a more reasonable approach, then you get elected. And then once you're in the government, then you can start, you know, moving towards targets that you'd like to see. But if you just try to jump in all, you know, the deep end right off the bat, you won't get into Ottawa. So that's my observation.
James?
Yeah, I just kind of want to address that point. I've got some questions myself. I mean, I'm sorry, sir. I forget your name in the Ukrainian Center there. I apologize. What? The gentleman who's speaking. I don't remember. Art?
Martin.
Oh, Martin. Okay, right. Sorry, Martin. Thank you. Yeah. So you're saying like big minimum wage. I mean, I don't think anyone's I don't think anyone's asking for a big minimum wage. I mean, people are asking for a living wage, a wage that's above the poverty line. And I think that's a very populist issue, right? And I think people would actually win votes, win support for, I mean, you're going to lose support in some sectors, yes, of course, right? You're going to have the bourgeois and their supporters and the far right. Even some of the far right actually will support this measure because it's in their economic interest to have a wage where they're not worried about where their next meal is coming from, to keep a roof for their head. So I mean, I think that is actually an elections issue that is electable rather than not electable, if that makes sense. I don't know. I mean, that's just my 2 cents on it. I'll just give it the floor now and let someone else maybe say something.
Well, I'll jump in here and say something about that, which is that we get the argument that it's just not workable, we can't afford it, the whole economy would collapse. Every time there's even the slightest suggestion to raise the minimum wage by even the paltriest amount, right? Like they trot out the same argument for a $12 minimum wage that they would trot out for a $23 minimum wage. So we can't, so there's just the only way we can avoid being criticized by right-wing economic theorists who are actually acting in bad faith is if we never say anything at all and we just give up the fight entirely. Well, we're not going to do that. Right? So, these are because they would work economically, not because people already have agreed with us. If people had agreed with us already, well, we wouldn't need to be having this debate about having, adopting a resolution for the Communist Party. We'd have communism already, right? So we know that it's a fight we have to fight for these ideas. So, I mean, I'm not downplaying the possibility that you could be just you could just be putting forward things that are just unrealistic. But I don't think it's unrealistic to go for a $23 minimum wage. I mean, good heavens, that's just the poverty line in Canada. The reason we picked $23 was because that was the poverty line in the most expensive city, in the country. And what about well, let's take it out of that military budget. Let's take it out of the taxes that the multi-billionaires are not paying. We don't have to put these questions forward as isolated individual demands where it has to stand or fall on its own, as if it would be the only thing that was changing. We're putting forward what we hope is an integrated program where all the aspects of it would work together. And so we always have to be looking at, as well at, that there's a great deal of wealth in the country that should be put to work for social purposes, rather than being siphoned off more and more to private profits. Right? We know basically there's two lines of economic policy. There's the increasing inequality, the increasing super profits of the multinational corporations, the increased funneling of government funding towards those corporations and the guarantee of the profits. Or there's the redistribution towards working people in the form of either their wages or the social services that are paid for by the state. And the question of what that wealth should be used for and who controls it is our main question. I mean, this is our case for socialism. So making the case for social reforms where the maximum benefit could only arise under socialism is not an argument against it. To my mind, it's an argument for it. That makes it a good demand because it makes the case for socialism. Okay, so I see Jason. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, if I can go with a general criticism of the party in general, is that I think we appeal far too much and far too hard towards labor aristocrats within Canada. And I think I would prefer to have fewer votes and a less successful party that maintains a correct, coherent international line with the international proletariat than one that makes apologia and exceptions and promises for labor aristocrats that they'll have an even better life under communism, when it may not entirely be the case. The labor aristocracy, like, I don't think we come to power by appealing to labor aristocrats and getting their votes. I think we need to challenge labor aristocrats, and as the imperialist system collapses, the views that we stood hard on become more and more valid. I don't think, we're not here to uphold or defend imperialism. And I'd rather have a correct international line and less immediate support within Canada than have, betray the international proletariat to appeal to labor aristocracy here at home.
Okay. Okay, so there's hand up at the Ukrainian Center. I'm not sure who there wanted to speak next.
Yes, Chris would like to address Alex Roth's comment. He asks, is demarketization of basic needs a feasible plan as opposed to something as corruptible as UBI? Chris would like to answer that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to kind of talk, like, I like the idea of demarketization. I'm communist. I want to no markets anyway. I want everything to be free access. But I think that if that was to be done, you would need like a vast, like you need essentially complete socialization of whatever it is you want to demarketize. Because if it's housing, for example, we talked about, you would need for there to be, you need for there not to be an exchange between a landlord and a tenant. You would need for it to just be access to a social good. And that is a really long-term, I think, kind of process that would be, a gradual building towards it would be kind of the government buying out housing, socializing housing, and then controlling rents down and down and down until the point that it can be fully integrated into a social system. I don't think it's something that can be put on the terms of an immediate political program or it's on the matter of decades, not years. I think demarketization as a goal.
Except that, in fact, it has been one of our, election platform items, and which we keep coming back to, of building a million units of social housing in Canada. So, in fact, we are approaching, we are making suggestions right away for it. It hasn't been described as demarketization of basic needs, but in effect, what we're saying is build so much social housing that it's going to impact also the market forces. So, it's the approach that we have in fact taken so far is not either or. We're putting forward all kinds of well, actually, it's kind of like throwing spaghetti at the wall, right? we put forward short-term proposals. We put forward long-term proposals. We put forward small-scale reforms. We put forward sweeping reforms. We put forward things that could be accomplished, right away. Things that couldn't be accomplished without, a really big advance towards socialism. So, in terms of what we put forward as, our practical suggestions, they don't have to all fall into one category. When we come to actually discuss the strategies of which, what's going to be our real priority campaign, what are we going to put most work into? Who are we going to work more, which alliances are we going to work hardest to build? Then those kinds of questions about what, which thing is a priority, which thing is doable now, become really important. But we do put forward a lot of ideas, with the intention that these are ideas that we expect will come to fruition in the fullness of time. If we don't say it, nobody else is going to say it. We have to start the discussion. So, okay, I see Helen next.
Okay, this time I could unmute myself easily. I found there is a topic that is not raised by the party, or I could be wrong. I think it's important to not only talk about having welfare, redistribute the wealth. Of course, that's important too. But also socialism is able to mobilize Canadian workers to create wealth. Like I found there's a tremendous amount of talents that are wasted because of capitalism. It's important to make people aware that Canadian talents are very much underutilized. If we can fully utilize the Canadian talent and skills, we are able to increase the overall amount of wealth in this country, which will benefit the people.
Okay, then Corinne? Corinne, your hand is up, but you are muted.
I keep clicking and it wouldn't go.
Okay.
I was reacting to Jason's thing about international proletariat. And I think the greatest way we approach that is to stop funding the military like we are. We back up all the exploitation through mining companies with our military around the world. But I think what we have for labor aristocracy in Canada is shrinking incredibly. We don't have the ability for one person really to support an entire family on one income anymore. We used to be able to do that because of a labor aristocracy, but that's not the case. I don't think so much anymore. It's shrinking drastically. We have a lot of people in this country that need some lifting up. It's getting quite tight for them and quite difficult. So I think in terms of international proletariat, we go for the military and raise up everybody.
Okay. All right, anybody else? I don't see any hands up right now. I'm just also like running through the chat. Are there any points that were in the chat that we haven't talked about? Okay, so see hand up again at the Ukrainian Center. Okay, whoever it is there, go ahead.
There's three of us here, so
yeah,
cut us some slack. Yeah, I'd like to.
That's fine.
I think the discussion on universal basic income has been very good. We could have a longer discussion on this and educational on it even, and then even a larger discussion on the question of reforms and the relation, how to call for reforms that are more that are less reversible, let's say, than otherwise, and then how to tie reforms to revolution, of course. But the points I'd like to make here are just smaller points on other parts of the document that I don't think have been addressed so far. The section on the more international section later on solidarity with Cuba, starting in paragraph 65. I just think it should be, the title should be extended solidarity with Cuba and the peoples of the world, because it deals with not just Cuba. So the section shouldn't just be titled on Cuba. And in paragraph 69, I'd like to see this paragraph 69 talking about the problem of refugees, the tremendous problem of refugees. I'd like something specifically said there about specifically the refugees from Africa across the Mediterranean into Europe. The situation, a very terrible situation, as we know, with thousands of deaths. And the situation was provoked by the war in Libya. So I think that should be brought out in that paragraph. And then later on, the economic section on economic crisis, the next section I think is really excellent and speaks to many of the points we've raised here tonight. In the following section, the political situation in Canada, towards the end of the section, it does mention the Liberal NDP pact. But I think earlier on, I think it should have been mentioned. Like in paragraph 89, it could have been mentioned. And in paragraph 109, it could have been mentioned. It's finally mentioned, I think, at the end of the section. But I think earlier, as soon as we start talking about the NDP in the political section, right away we should have mentioned that the NDP has made this pact with the Liberal Party. So which shows the tailism of the NDP in relationship to the Liberal Party, you can say. So those are only the relatively large of my relatively small points that I'd like to address.
Okay. Okay. So, see, any more hands up? Okay. So, okay. So, okay. So I'll remind you again, comrades, that we do have the pre-convention bulletins, which are produced, to be produced in English and French, and transmitted to all party members. So all these various points which have been raised, right? I mean, I noticed, for example, Chris has already done some work to put his, into writing. These are all, these are the kinds of things that you can actually also submit to the pre-convention discussion. So whether it's what things that you've said here, or if some of the questions here have given rise to some thoughts that you think you can address some of these questions here, and like move the debate forward, bring make, just so that we all have a more sophisticated understanding of a lot of these questions that we've been asking about and debating. It's a good idea to send in your submissions to the convention, pre-convention bulletins, and you don't have to wait for a later meeting where we're going to discuss a later part of the document. You can do that anytime now. Okay. So I see, is this a hand up again or still for the Ukrainian Center?
So yes, Chris has another point he'd like to address.
Okay.
Very short in comparison to the other two. So,
okay.
it was another one of the points from 113. There's the issue of rollback prices and enact price controls on food, fuel, and housing. I think this could be expanded on just a little bit. I think Canada needs to set itself to ensuring not only generally lower prices, but consistent prices across the country. I think that this should be done through price controls, and I think creation for crown corporations, public stores that are able to ensure communities' needs can be met where private business is unwilling to offer a fair price on goods and services would be good. I think this would do a great deal to improve the standards of living in rural and isolated communities, particularly those located in Canada's northern territories. That's the whole point.
Which kind of stores?
Anything from grocery to gas. Because all I remember is the first time looking at somebody's somebody tweeted out a picture of like a basic fruit bowl in the Northwest Territories, and it costs like $70. And that's just kind of how prices work up there.
The only thing is, if you have something that's far cheaper, nobody will buy. Nobody will go to that other store. They'll go to business.
Good. Frankly, good. There should only be public stores.
Or co-ops. We could call for something for co-ops as a transition.
Kind of drastic. You're going to put a lot of people out of business.
The Communist Party, we're a drastic party.
We're a communist party. We're not
I'm getting
reformists.
that
We're not social democrats. We're communists.
Okay.
So, okay, don't see any more hands up right now at the moment. Anybody else? Have I missed any sort of substantive things in the chat? I think we might circle back, in fact, to some a couple of points I said that we wouldn't really talk about yet, because I wanted us to try to stay focused on the sort of beginning part of this document as much as possible. But I can't even remember now who it was. Somebody raised the question about China's long-term plan, right? Like how, China has a sort of like 100-year plan to achieve communism, not a short-term plan. And, whether that is still their perspective. I'm still scrolling back through here trying to find that. Does anybody have anything they want to say about that?
Jason has his hand raised, Naomi.
Oh, okay, Jason, go ahead.
Yes, and I actually just think this kind of ties into something, it's not on the program, but maybe it's something that should be discussed. I mean, it's not urgent or immediate, but it's the way Marxists correctly understand things in the world is with the methodology of historical materialism. We understand the line of how the thing existed in the past and trace that line forward to the future. And when you understand that line, you understand how the thing exists in the world today. That's historical materialism. In order to understand the Chinese Communist Party as it exists in the present, we should do a proper and thorough and full investigation of what this party is and its history, especially the Cultural Revolution, because that's the series of events that define how that party exists in the present. And I think our party should conduct its own investigation into the Cultural Revolution at some point so that we can reach an actual clear definitive conclusion about what the modern iteration of the Communist Party of China is and whether or not their intent is socialism or if they capitalist roaders are still on the capitalist road.
Okay. Helen?
I think I have some more information maybe about China. There are some cultural differences, right? Like I could be wrong, please criticize me, but I think from the Western perspective, the Westerners, they want to believe that they want to find some kind of a universal truth. But in China, you never have that universal truth. It's a process. It's an effort to reach that point. So the same principle applies to socialism. There's never been any perfect socialist countries, but it's a long process to build socialism. So China is very practical and objective by labeling itself as the first stage of socialism. I think that's rather objective. I think there are a lot of imperfections in that country. However, China is moving forward toward socialism. And China is the most promising country in building socialism for now and in the foreseeable future. That's just my opinion.
Okay, I'd like to just interject here for a moment, sort of changing the subject a bit. I'm going to, received an email today announcing a May Day event, which has been organized primarily by our party comrades in Ontario. So but there will be, it will be an online event. And so I'm going to forward that email out over the next couple of days to all our members and contacts. And I would like to urge, comrades to all attend that if they possibly can, because, there are some pretty high-powered speakers involved in that event. So although it's primarily, I believe, centered on Ontario and Ontario issues, it is also the case that it is, that they're having international, discussion and international speakers. So the most important one being Vijay Prasad, who's really like a really high-powered speaker on an international level. So please watch out for that email coming. And I hope we will also get some more updates about what's coming up for May Day activities locally in Edmonton and other centers in Alberta as well. So we will keep you informed as much as we can about what's coming up there. So I see hand up again at the Ukrainian Center.
Yes, I think Martin wants to talk about China, maybe, or Martin?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, if there's anybody that wants to learn about China, they don't have to send a delegation. There's an excellent course offered free online from Harvard University. I took it in December. And it starts, back in the 60s, and it teaches you the evolution of China right up to present day. And they give case studies of different companies. Now they're world-class companies, but they started back in 19, I forget what it was, 65 or 70, when the only companies were government companies. And yet this guy, he was on the outskirts of Shanghai, managed to get this little company started that sold tractor parts, and now it's the biggest car part supplier in the world, pretty much. So they go through all different aspects of China. So if you want to learn about it, just go online. It's called edX, ED with a big X. And it's from Harvard, it's free, and it doesn't take that long, but it's some very interesting stuff. Now, if you want a certificate from that course, then you have to pay a little bit of money. It's not very much, but
To be certified China expert.
well, not an expert, but I just had an interest, and I was in an oil camp sitting there with nothing to do, so I took it online.
Excellent.
Okay. So, okay, we haven't quite come to the end, but we're coming up on 2 hours here. And when I don't know about the rest of you, my attention does somewhat start to flag. So just going to ask one more time, does anybody else wants to say anything? There are some people who haven't, really haven't spoken here yet. Does anybody have any points they want to bring up about anything that's been talked about here, or any other aspects of the first part of this document? It's really intended to be an open-ended discussion for whatever's on your mind. I've tried to take some notes here about the various things that people have said. I think we will follow up. There have been some themes that have arisen, and where people have had some differences of opinion. So obviously, there are some topics that would be fruitful for further discussion and debate. And so we're not going to forget what people have said here. We will be guided by what people are interested in what we think is important to discuss and have educational and practical discussions about. But also, again, I do urge all the party members to submit written submissions to the pre-convention discussion, so that you're think about what's been said here, take it further, amplify on it, and come up with, try to be concise, because we're asking for 800 words maximum submissions. But you can say it a lot in 800 words if you've thought about it ahead of time. So hopefully, we'll see some of the people attending this meeting today who will appear in the next issue of that pre-convention bulletin. And you can send those in at any time. There's no, up until the deadline, I think, is finally June 20th, I believe. So there's time to think about things, reread the first section of the document as well. Like, in light of this discussion we've had, I think you'll find, it will help to adjust, you'll go back and read some of those paragraphs and see where you think they can be improved, or you may decide that they're good enough as they stand, depending on how you interpret this discussion we've had here. So this is a work in progress, and we will be having at least one more additional meeting to discuss the latter parts of the document, and hopefully more than that. Hopefully we will be able to have time between now and the convention for further discussion. And as I said, we will be having our provincial nominating meeting, where we will formalize the votes for delegates to the convention, where we will nominate people to be elected to the Central Committee, and where we will discuss and pass, like, to have votes on resolutions that we want to put forward to the convention, whether it's resolutions that are intended to amend this document we're discussing, or resolutions of some other form. So unless anybody has anything further to say on that, I think, we'll probably have another one of these in, say, probably in about 4 weeks. If anyone has any real problems with Monday night as a meeting time, please let me know, because we will, we don't want to restrict this only to those who are able to attend on a Monday night. So if not, I'll say thank you, and hopefully we'll be talking with everybody again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Naomi. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
for
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, comrades.
Everybody, see
And
you.
so,
Thank you. Have a good night.
so
you.
Martin, it had been my intention to actually be there, but things got hectic, so I didn't have time to travel. So
Yeah, I wonder
Wow,
why
yeah.
you're.
but actually, hopefully we can actually kind of get together for coffee.
Yeah. Right now, I got a lot of free time.
Okay. All right. Right. Okay, so I'll call you separately later
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
Okay.
Naomi, can I say, I didn't bring it up at the meeting, but my main point of contention is, I said, I'd like to I'd like to challenge the suggested regional distribution of CC members.
Oh, yeah.
I think we can discuss it at the club level, we can discuss it at the Alberta Convention. I'd like it to be an Alberta resolution. I would like to make the CC more representative regionally. So I would like Alberta to have 3 CC members instead of 2. I think BC should be reduced from 6. If it's according to population, BC would be reduced to 4, but I suggest BC be reduced to 5. I accept that Manitoba have 2, which is more than they deserve in terms of population. Same with the Maritimes. I accept that they have more than they deserve. But I also think Quebec should be given an increased seat given population from 5 to 6. And so I would also say Ontario be reduced by 1. So basically I want Ontario and BC to be reduced by 1, and then Alberta and Quebec to be increased by 1.
Yeah, I agree with the increase part. The decrease, I'm not sure. I don't know.
But I'm prepared to I'll write a longer argument for it.
Yeah, sure, you can send that in.
Yeah.
This is the
And
same
you
fight
can
we're
submit
having
it.
in the YCL.
The West wants in.
We do.
Okay,
It's true.
so, well, Alex, when you say by population, are you referring to like just the population numbers of the number of people who live in provinces, or are you talking about the party membership?
Obviously, I don't know the party membership, so it has to be based on population of Canada and population of the provinces. Because I did the calculations, and BC has 13% of the population, but has 20% of the CC members. Alberta has 11% of the population, but just under 7% of the CC members, and so on and so forth. So BC is Ontario is correctly represented as it stands, and Quebec is almost correctly represented as it stands. I mean, Manitoba has only 1.37 million. Alberta has 4.37 million, but we're supposed to have equal numbers of CC seats. So that's a big.
Alex, there should be also a consideration of the membership increase. And we are expecting a greater increase of membership. So the central committee members should be increased accordingly as well. So we can make a point from that perspective as well.
Yeah, right. Well, it's the bird and the egg too. I mean, does the larger number of CC members, does the CC members reflect the sizes of the party in the different regions? Or if we have more CC members from different regions, will that increase the number of party members in those regions?
Yeah, the growth. Alex,
I do believe that the Maritimes deserve greater over-representation, and I accept that Manitoba deserves greater representation, and Quebec should have at least equal representation based on, smaller sized communities deserve over-representation on the CC, I think.
Yeah, so we should take all these into considerations, the percentage, membership increase, percentage rate of increase, those kinds of things.
Yes, correct, yeah.
You could submit two resolutions, one pertaining to directly the provincial population, and one pertaining to membership numbers, so that could be debated more freely at convention and decided there, and they could decide on some combination of the two or some system that they can work out. But I think it would be good to send forward, any ideas about changes that should be made.
Yeah, good. Okay, good. Thanks for all your comments, feedbacks.
Well, I'm going to say that I think what's likely to happen is because we have been such a small party that we've actually been somewhat top heavy, like just the size of the central committee in proportion to the size of our whole party has been pretty large, right? That as we grow, that our membership in general will probably grow faster than our central committee. So in some ways, it means like that it's that we become less top heavy, right? So that, but it also means, it actually means like that there's the levels of leadership that have to be developed in between the central committee and just the club level also have to be developed. Because effectively we've had no provincial level, we've had no provincial committee in Alberta for a long time. There's quite a number of other parts of the country where that's, it's the exception rather than the rule to have a provincial committee. And, so what I think we, just in terms of what's practical and useful, it's going to be more important to build up the low level and middle level cadre and leadership, that people have develop their skills and their experience at those levels, the more local level, and work up gradually towards, the countrywide level. So.
To your first point there, Naomi, yeah, I wouldn't propose an increase in the size of the CC. That's the easiest answer to this, to just add more CC members. But for the reasons you've said, I don't propose that. I propose just a small shuffling, not an increase.
Okay. But
okay.
Certainly, yeah. Send in, write it in, and that it will probably generate debate.
Yeah, good, excellent.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I think that's it for now. I think I'll say goodnight.
I just can I talk to Alex for a second? It's on other business, but anyone else, it's not secret or anything.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I got a call from Hadja today about using the hall
yes.
on May 1st, Sunday afternoon during the day. It's a Sudanese community group. And I think that, I went ahead and said yes and set a price, very modest price. And we'd like to take a thing, but there's nothing going on at the time. And they want to use it during the day on May the 1st, which is next Sunday. So I went ahead and said yes. She'll confirm with me whether they're going to do it. They'll be doing things in the basement, bringing in food and so on. But they'll do all the cleaning and they'll pay some money for it. So not as much as we should.
Now, those were my only questions, if we needed to help set anything up or if what parts of the hall they needed. So that's fine. Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. I just wanted to let you know, so that someone besides me and Hadja know about it.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
I'm just really busy because I've got all kinds of performances coming up and so on. So.
Okay, thanks. Okay, bye everyone.
No, Jeremy.
Yes.
Jeremy, have you updated the poster yet?
No, I'm still struggling making the event. Like what I'm trying to do is give you a poster that's reflecting the YouTube event that I'm trying to, and I tried yesterday. I have a bit more time tonight to figure it out because I actually want to do broader like public publicization on the event with just a general YouTube that we could stream kind of link.
But can I disagree with you on this?
Oh, okay, yeah. What do you think about it?
I think it's a good idea, but the problem is I already sent out the poster to so many people.
Oh, yeah, fair enough.
That will cause confusion. That's what I'm afraid of.
Well, it wouldn't cause confusion in the sense that if people access the Zoom link, they could still get in. If they access the YouTube link, they could still get in. It would just be like a multi-streaming service we'd be using.
So you think they can still use that code?
Yeah, that's the primary where we're doing the meeting, and then the YouTube will just be more like put on the Twitter page and all that stuff.
So there are 2 channels.
Yeah.
Oh, when do you think you can?
Tonight. I'm gonna work on it tonight and get this done because I need to get it done.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I'm very pushy. I apologize.
No, thank you. No, it really brings things to my attention when people are, so it's good. It's good.
Because I get forget sometimes.
Yeah, me too. Me
And
too.
also the work on this first. It make me anxious. And then the video and the picture, please.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah.
Work on the poster first. This
Yes.
is important.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Thank you.
Okay. Well, take care.
Have a good night.
Good night, everybody. Good night, Helen.
Good night. Oh, Bly.
Yes.
You know what? We selected the second movie. Do you want to download also?
What is the name of the movie?
Well, I have to send it to you because it's in English. Some
Okay.
yeah, some Chinese people may not understand.
Yeah.
So I have one that is with English and the Chinese subtitles.
Well, I don't know. We're used to reading subtitles here.
Yeah.
I would suggest that you favor the Chinese language for the sound and then have subtitles.
Yeah. So the one I have both subtitles, English and Chinese.
Great. Well, you send it to me and I'll try downloading it again.
Yeah, but the website is Chinese. That's the problem.
The what side is Chinese?
The website. So the instruction is Chinese.
Oh,
Yeah, but it's the second button from the left. That's a download. That's the download button.
I'll phone you if I have problems.
If you have problem. And Bly, Naomi suggested to organize a Chinese New Year celebration. What do you think about that?
Okay, when is the Chinese New Year celebration?
That's over half a year ahead.
Okay, well, that sounds like that.
Yeah, but my plan is to invite people from different nationalities for performance. For example, the Ukrainian dance, Latin American dance, and some performers, Canadians.
That would be very difficult to get going.
Doable?
We might want to sit and think about that. And I really don't have time to work on it now.
I can work on that, but do you think we can, do you support the proposal?
Well, I don't know if I do, because I don't know if it's going to be that practical to get the performers lined up and.
Oh, I can get a performance. You
Well,
don't.
some of them, but we want to have a range of people. But I really don't have time to talk about it now. I will think about it and get back to you. I've got to get to work on another project. I've got a very busy week.
Okay, sounds good. I'll talk to you next week then.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Yeah, good night.